Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. And welcome back to another episode of Integrated Insights. My name is Michael Hefner. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Andrew McQuilkin and Dave Parker. Hey, guys.
Hey, Michael. How are you?
Today, we're going to be talking about clear communication. So we try to quarterback the communication during the business transaction process. And first, we're going to get started on what role do advisors play in the communication process during a business transaction?
That's a great question. It's probably one of the reasons that advisors are needed if the advisors can communicate well for everybody. I think we've met a lot of business owners, and look, as we always say, some of the business owners we've met are some of the smartest people we know. They're street smart. They've developed these amazing companies, and just because someone develops an amazing company doesn't mean they can communicate clearly and properly the right way or the right things in order to get a transaction done. And a lot of business owners, I think I'm going to give it a shot on my own. Then we hear from them later going, well, that didn't work out so well. Almost always because the communication breaks down at some point. It's a game. It is a total game. I think we're going to be doing a podcast soon on negotiations and on negotiating, and it's a little bit of a game, and all that involves communication. So when an intermediary gets involved, they should be able to communicate clearly to our client. What I feel like our job is to stay in constant communication to our client, communicating clearly what the intentions the other party has towards purchasing in this case. And if we're representing the seller, communicating clearly to a buyer what the intentions are of the seller. And oftentimes that gets muddied when buyers and sellers are talking to each other directly because they're out trying to outmaneuver, outthink each other. That's our job. We get to outmaneuver and outthink each other. It works a lot of the time. Sometimes it doesn't work so well, but most of the times it works. Wouldn't you say, Andrew, don't you think? Because you're one of the first ones to communicate with people, right? Like you're meeting them. Andrew's the master. We kind of laugh because the guy can get into any door he wants to. It's like, how did you talk to that guy? Yes, I just kept.
Just called the business and asked to talk to him.
Yeah, well.
I think that the key thing there, David, that you kind of were intimating, I mean, look, you have two parties, a buyer and a seller, and they both have different things that are important to them, right? And so one party wants to communicate what's important to them, and one wants to communicate what's important to them, and they don't always match up. And so, and really, it's not that they don't agree with each other. It's more about they're just putting more importance on different things. And so the communication with that, I think is for us is key to understand those intentions of each party. And so most PE groups, I'll at least at the beginning will communicate with, and understanding their intentions is always key. And so I'll have several calls a week to understand what that PE group is trying to do, their goals, their not just their criteria, but what do they do with the business afterwards? And all of those things, and that's important because that way we can let the seller know what to expect.
Yeah, speaking directly, let me speak to that because we've done something. You and I have done something quite often together, and I think that this represents one of the ways that we keep those lines of communication open is we try to vet the buyers coming in. Now, every buyer thinks they're the best buyer, right? But we get on the phone and we pretty much interview the buyers. Now, if a seller is just to get on the phone and someone says, "Oh yeah, we come in and we pay 5 times, your EBITDA or your whatever it is," and your earnings, and we have limited due diligence. We make this super easy transaction. We're like going, no, there's no transaction that's easy. There's no due diligence that's quick. It's like, so we've been through it enough to where we can actually, call BS and what's BS and kind of get to the bottom line. How many times have you retraded a deal? What's your retrade? I mean, is that typically how you operate? Some PE groups, that's just typically how they operate. They'll go and get as many LOIs signed as they can, and then they'll start, figuring out which one they can close. Or that's kind of atypical, but that's done out there. And we just want to flush all that out at the beginning. And so Andrew will get in the door with people and talk to them and find a list, and then we'll start interviewing them. And we find it kind of fun because we get to ask all the hard questions. But really, I mean, yeah, if you want, honestly, I kind of feel like if you want the right to go in and buy one of our clients' businesses, I feel like we represent really good business owners, and you want the right to go in and buy one of our guys' businesses. We want to protect them, and one way we do that is to make sure that you're a qualified buyer. And same thing with the seller. We want to make sure that it's a good match. Sometimes it's just not a good match, and you don't know until you really find out what they're wanting. And sometimes if you're getting in them to communicate what their intentions are, as Andrew said a minute ago, their intentions may be, oh, I want, $100 million from my business that does $2 million in EBITDA. Well, we're probably not your guy to go get you $100 million. I don't know of anyone who can. You better go find that buyer on your own, right?
Yeah, and I think, and even then, I think we've talked in the past about what is important to a seller, and I think that it's not always the purchase price. It's not always about the number. What's important to them is the people. It's about their legacy. It's about all these different things, and not all buyers can meet that, right? And so we have to understand their what's important to them, so that we can communicate that clearly, and we can only know that if they communicate that with us. And so they shouldn't hide what's important to them to us, right? We have to have that information.
Right. Yeah. So, I think just overall, Michael, just the communication is just, look, that's what the whole transaction is, communicating. And I think, honestly, let me say this true also, communicating with integrity and communicating honestly and openly. I mean, it just kind of is what it is sometimes. And we kind of operate around an adage that one of the early investors in one of my very first businesses years ago told me, bad news gets no better with age. And so you really think about that. And Grant and I have operated on that for a long, and neither one of us like bad news. Neither one of us like to address bad news, but we've always found out that if you go ahead and address it, people really appreciate that. And I think that most business owners really, and buyers really like just very front, just this is the way it is. And gets through negotiations a lot quicker that way too, and gets to the bottom line. So, communicate with integrity, communicate with honesty and openness, and communicate regularly so people understand and know what you're doing. When we get a seller, I think, Michael, one thing we're doing better than what we've done before at our company is starting to communicate with our sellers on a more regular basis, because we figured out that was kind of a blind spot we had. We wanted to make sure we were communicating as often as we could. So we've put new processes in place to where our clients are hearing from us on a regular basis. Yeah, because they need to. It's their business.
Dave, talk more about when things go wrong. Like you mentioned, we do a lot of the vetting to try to avoid getting in front of some of that, but sometimes we still get the bad news. Sometimes people don't tell us things right away. Sometimes, things are going normal, but somebody still reacts negatively. What do we do? How do we step in there, and what can that look like?
That's a little tough.
We've seen many reactions to this, right? I mean, look, deals can fall apart if communication goes awry. I mean, it can, and I know you asked Dave that specifically, but I know it can. I mean, there are drastic differences in how we look. We can try to save it. I've seen Dave save a deal. Several deals just by the way that he communicates, and so I think that's that's worth noting. That anything we can explain anything, but as long, I think it's important to go through us, just as the advisor. I think that is also very, it helps the deal move forward, rather than just fall apart.
Yeah. And sometimes, we can't talk super detailed how we keep people at the table because then they wouldn't need us, right? But I really think it's respecting people with where they are. Look, sometimes people just wake up on a Monday, case in point, sometimes me, and it's just, you just don't, you got to really work at having a great day. So, the Monday Dave, as they call it. But sometimes deals go wrong just because someone's other stuff is happening in their life, and you just have to kind of let it be for a minute and walk with them through that a little bit and show empathy toward that, and the deal will start coming back around. You got to almost, sometimes I think we try too hard. This is something Grant, my business partner, has taught. Sometimes we maybe try too hard, although I do think we do have to get in and do our best to make sure we're doing, but sometimes it's giving a little bit of breathing room to come back to life, and massaging in a bit, giving a little CPR in the process. So case in point, we had a deal a couple years ago, just all of a sudden just stopped, and everyone walked away and went, this just isn't going to work. And so we were representing the seller. I got the buyer on the phone. Both people were great people. Both people really liked each other. And I thought, this just can't end like that. This just can't stop like this. Something's not quite right here. And all it was just, you know what? In this case, it was kind of like getting the plaintiff on the stand. You really don't want the plaintiff to get on the stand to be the witness, but in some case, you have to put him on the stand. In this particular case, it just took having a couple of individual conversations with buyer and seller, and then facilitating a call between them. And within a day, it was worked out, and we were able to get back on track. But it's taking the initiative, because oftentimes we all know this, most people don't like to deal with conflict. So when conflict comes up, they just want to walk away from it or ignore it or put their head in the sand like an ostrich. And really, I think what our job is to get in the middle of it and pull the heads out of the sand and say, let's make sure if we're going to end this, let's make sure at least we end it correctly. Let's don't burn bridges on the way out. And then I think we get it resurrected.
Yeah. I think, look, a deal is kind of like a dance, right? And if you're dancing with somebody, you might step on toes. And if you step on toes, people get hurt. And so they react a little bit poorly. And so we're dealing with people, right? We're dealing with most of the time it's a business owner that's selling their business that they've owned for a long time. It's their baby. It's emotional. And so we have to respect that and be patient with it. It's not always the immediate reaction of that business owner or of whoever it is that is how they truly feel or how they want to move forward. And so that Dave's right. Just, hey, let's just zoom out for a moment, big picture, and let's be patient. Okay, now let's come together again and let's talk about what's important, and then maybe we can move forward from there. And so we're dealing with people. It's gonna, communication's gonna go awry at some point, and so we just have to react to that way.
I think the other place it can go really bad sometimes, or maybe not go well, is during due diligence. I mean, when you get that Excel spreadsheet from the buyer, and we do a lot, we do buy side as well, so we're actually sending out that spreadsheet on behalf of the buyer. People look at that and they go, 284 lines. What are you talking about? 40 cells long, wide, and 200. So we always, but what we do? We call them in advance and say, this is coming. We communicate with them rather than just giving an email. We call them, we communicate with them. And, Mason's getting good at this, calling them saying, hey, you're going to get this spreadsheet. Don't freak out. This is the same spreadsheet that you use. We've tried to kind of zero it into your business, but it's still going to have a lot of things that are just not applicable. Just put NA and move on. And just kind of go for the easy, go for the low hanging fruit first, knock out that easy stuff, and then we'll get back to the other stuff. But what happens also, how that can go wrong though, is that people get a little sloppy during due diligence, and they don't either want to answer the questions, that it's too much trouble to supply the documents, so they don't. And then that's discovered late in the process. And so again, one of the things we try to do is we try to stay on top of that. So sometimes it's not verbal communication. It's looking at all the written communication that's coming in and making sure it is what it's supposed to be. Nothing gets passed on to a seller or to a buyer, for instance, from our seller until it's passed over someone in our office's eyes to make sure that it is what they've asked for. Again, that's one reason and honestly, due diligence is what will typically blow a deal apart if someone's trying to do it directly without an intermediary, because it's just too overwhelming.
So Dave, Andrew, sometimes, we help somebody sell their business, right? And some people that maybe haven't sold a business before can think, oh yeah, I'm done at that point, right? There's nothing else to do. I'm never going to hear from those people again. But sometimes that's not the case, right? What can that look like? What are the circumstances that can cause communication to need to continue after the transaction is over? And what does that look like?
Yeah, right. Never hear them again. I'm totally gone. Yes, absolutely. No, I think it really depends. It really depends on the type of deal, right? The structure of the deal. I mean, are you sticking around for a certain period of time? We try to script what that transition is going to be ahead of time. And so you don't really know. I know I would say with that transition period of right after closing, there's going to have to be some handing over of customers and transition, just kind of helping them through how they're running the business and getting them acquainted with running the business. And so there is going to be that. A lot of times, a buyer might pay the owner's phone bill and just say, hey, every now and then I might have a question. I need your help. And, how this customer responded this way, and how have you dealt with that successfully in the past? Those are the types of things that can happen. Of course, for the deal related, we have working capital adjustments. We have all of that, or the true up. Those types of things that's going to have to be communicated for sure. But as far as the business and the operations of it, there might be some. I know Dave has handled this before, being a business owner, and so I'll let him give examples. But that does happen for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. No matter whether you're when we sold, I can't think of a business that we've sold that we've owned that we haven't had to be involved quite a bit after the transition. And again, I'm just going to tell you up front, people, we try to prep our sellers for this. It's an integrity thing. To me, I know a lot of things come back to that. We keep saying that, but really this is a high integrity thing. Do you appreciate what's gone on enough to want to make sure that transition's good? It's easy to sit back and go, oh, I hope they, under your breath, and go, I hope they fail, because they can't possibly run as good as me, right? That's the arrogant seller. And that's when he's not selling for the right intentions, I think. But it's really fun when you find a seller who's saying, man, I want them to succeed. If they've got rollover equity in the deal, they might be a little more engaged. But we tell sellers, you've got to be engaged. We do a lot in the medical space, in the medical facilities, small medical facilities. And we've owned one of these ourselves. And so the transition time afterwards is so important, because you're transferring licenses, you're transferring pharmacy licenses. There's a lot of regulatory things that have to be engaged. And we've had situations where, we basically helped a buyer buy one nearly out of bankruptcy, and there was no help on that. We had to hire someone who used to work for the company to come in and help with that. Another one where, the seller just wasn't helpful or being helpful in the way they approached things. And then the other ones, where maybe they just didn't realize the magnitude of the amount that they would need to help. So, but being available right away for that transition is super important. And oftentimes they get a big check in the bank, And they're like, well, this is nice. I'm going to go on vacation. We tell people, can you hold on to your vacation for about 6 weeks? Because they're really going to need your transition time. And we don't, if we're not representing the seller, we don't really have a say so in that. But we tell the sellers we represent, you just plan on being around for a while and being very available to help, because every time within a few days after transactions close, someone's calling and saying, well, we didn't discuss this, or they're not doing this right, or so-and-so's not cooperating. And all of a sudden it's just like mommy and daddy are going, who's talking to mommy and daddy, figuring out who's going to solve their problem for them.
And on the flip side, I will say that we've had several clients that say, oh no, this business is not, they're going to need me around. They need me to run the business, and honestly, most of the time we just tell them, look, you're not going to want to be around. Like like you will not like the changes. You're not going to want to stick around, and the buyer may not want them to be around. Right. And so, because if you're around, who are the employees going to listen to? They're going to listen to the old owner, not the new owner. And so there's this conflict that might arise. And the thing is that we try to balance it to where we're limiting it to a reasonable transition. We had one client a few years ago where he literally told us, no, this business will go into the ground without me. And told us that, not the buyer. And so, but I think it was we limited to, I think we got him down to 6 months transition. And there were some key things that needed to be transitioned, and the buyer knew that. But 60 days in, he called us and he said, "Guys, you were right. I don't want to be here anymore." And so that's after 6 months. It was so great to see him. He was so excited to be out.
And you know what? Good on them, because they deserve, and they've built a good business and they've got a good payday coming. They deserve to be able to walk away. And that, what that tells us, guys, that tells us we did our job well, right? When we've matched buyer and seller together and the seller can enjoy what they've worked so hard for, that's a good day in our books, right?
That's right. And that's why we do what we do, right? So any business owner listening to this, we'd love to sit down with you and would love to help with your business transaction, help with communication through that process. That's all the time we got for today, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michael.
And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.